Welcome back to the Sandwich Generation Pod, where we talk about what it's really like to be squeezed between raising kids and caring for aging parents. I'm Eliesa.
And I'm Robyn, and today we're diving into a tough but really important topic, and one that's pretty personal to me as well. We're talking about dementia and Alzheimer's.
It's not the easiest conversation, but if you're in the Sandwich Generation, chances are you've either faced it, are facing it, or you might face it in the future. Today we welcome Dr. Elizabeth Edgerly, the Senior Director of Community Programs and Services at the Alzheimer's Association, where she oversees nationwide initiatives that support individuals living with Alzheimer's and other dementias. Elizabeth plays a crucial role in the association's efforts to provide high-quality care, educational resources, and supportive services. Her leadership has been instrumental in advancing the organization's mission to serve all those impacted by these conditions. Dr. Edgerly was honored as one of Silicon Valley Business Journal's 100 Women of Influence in 2023, and we are so lucky to have Elizabeth with us today. So let's get to it. We are so thankful and grateful to have you here and to have your time. I just feel so lucky. I feel like guests are coming to us that we could have only hoped for, and you're definitely one of them. And even after our little meet and greet conversation, I was I cannot wait. I cannot wait to talk to you more.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. Happy to be here with both of you.
Thank you.
Yay.
Okay,
So let's jump in.
Yeah, let's jump in. I think it's amazing that what you do, obviously, and I know that you also have a bit of a personal connection to what you do. Can you just sort of give us a little bit of an intro and background to who you are and how you came to this work?
Yeah, so I work with the Alzheimer's Association, and I'm the Senior Director for Community Programs and Services, which means that I'm responsible for designing the programs for caregivers and for people living with Alzheimer's, especially those with a new diagnosis. So I am all about trying to make sure that people get the information that they need when they need it, and that they also know that they are not alone living with Alzheimer's or another type of dementia or caring for someone. And I've been with the association for almost 30 years, which is shocking to think about. I've been in different roles over the years and focused on our full mission, but last year changed to this role because I so want to make sure that we do everything we can to help families who are going through this. My background is I'm a clinical psychologist, and I worked with people with Alzheimer's when I was getting started. But about 20 years into my career, my mother started showing some signs and ultimately was diagnosed with Lewy Body Dementia. And I was her long distance caregiver. I lived in California. She lived in Maine alone. And I was her long distance caregiver.
So how did that work being so far away?
It didn't work very well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really, really hard, especially because she lived alone. Mm-hmm. That makes it even harder. So we had to rely on friends and neighbors to kind of check in on her. And then we also used things like technology to see if we could kind of have some protection, some guardrails in place just in case, and tried to hire a geriatric care manager, but there really weren't any in the community. Yeah. So ultimately, we needed to move her. She needed to move into an assisted living where someone could at least watch out for her. But it was tough. It was really, really hard.
Are you an only? I can't remember. Or
No, I'm one of four. So my siblings, especially my sisters, were involved, very involved. So.
And did they live closer?
No, nobody lived anywhere near my mom. Yeah.
Okay, so everyone was spread out, and then you were the primary person who really arranged, checked in, was caregiving from afar.
Yeah.
How
don't
long?
Recommend it. I don't recommend it if you can help it.
I know. It's impossible to know what to do. I think one of the things that you mentioned, that even though you had worked for the Alzheimer's Association at that point for 20 years, around the time that your mom was diagnosed, even though you work every day in the Alzheimer's world, you still felt like, what more can I do? What else is there? Am I doing right by her, right? You still had a lot of questions.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was the most humbling experience of my life. I mean, there were certainly some things that I thought, oh, okay, I can do this. But interacting with the medical community and dealing with hospitalizations and emergencies, and frankly, the assisted living situation from afar, I thought, how do people do this? I'm an expert on how it's supposed to work and a strong advocate, and my husband is as well. So, he's also a PhD in clinical psychology, worked full time in a hospital setting. And the two of us were like, wow, this system is not really set up to help people with Alzheimer's or another type of dementia. If there's an acute medical issue, they just don't know what to do with it. And it was rough. We need to do better. We as a society need to do better
Mm-hmm.
to
And
help people.
especially you speak the language, like you speak the alphabet soup, like we do not, and we are learning. But the fact that you had the vernacular and you still were struggling is very telling of where we're at.
Yeah,
with our
it was
systems.
absolutely. It was eye-opening. I thought we have to help these systems find a way to be compassionate and knowledgeable and understanding, because I really felt like all of those things were missing at different points. And if you're dealing with this as a family member, so many times I felt like I must be missing something.
Oh,
Yeah.
there's yes.
Yeah. And so I'd reach out to a colleague. I knew a lot of experts, obviously. I'd pull every string I had. If I had a connection, I was on the phone. And every once in a while, they'd say, oh, and they'd tell me something that I didn't know. But then there were other times where, they're like, no, you're doing everything right.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, that's not good.
And it's still this hard.
And it's still this hard. And it's still not going very well.
And so I just wanted to go to the basics because we have a doctor on. Very exciting. We can ask all the questions. Can you talk about the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's and how people use those terms and how to properly use the terms?
Yes. And it's very confusing. I find that until people have had it explained, it's like, what is the difference between these two terms? Because they get used interchangeably a lot, right? Mm-hmm. So let's start with Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is a specific disease, and it happens to be the most common cause of dementia, which I'm going to come to in just a moment. But Alzheimer's is a disease of the brain. It's progressive. It tends to attack memory very early, but not always. Sometimes it's language, but people have trouble with judgment, reasoning, being able to do things independently and effectively, and they become confused and struggle, and it gets worse over time. So Alzheimer's represents about 70% of dementia. But what is dementia? So dementia is the generic term for a condition that affects people as an adult when they've been at a certain level, and then they develop a disease or another condition that causes them to have cognitive deterioration. So in other words, dementia means that I'm having difficulties, significant difficulties in different areas. Memory, often, language, judgment, reasoning, behavior. Having dementia means generically I'm having cognitive difficulties, and they're going to get worse over time. What it doesn't tell you is what's causing those symptoms of dementia. So dementia is kind of like a generic category. You might think of it as like fruit. Fruit's the generic category, but then there's certain types of fruit. And so dementia is a generic category. But then Alzheimer's is the number one cause of those symptoms of dementia. Vascular dementia is another one caused by small strokes. Lewy body that my mom had is up there. That's third.
Typically, what is Lewy body? Like, how is that a specific
disease?
Or what's different from,
Yeah. So in Lewy body dementia, the symptoms are a little bit different, and the causes are also different too. So what we'll see, although we have a lot to learn, we don't know everything
Yeah.
about any of these diseases. So let me just say that.
Yeah.
So I'll share the current state at this point. So in Lewy body dementia, and in my mom's case too, like her memory was, she had some issues with memory, but actually it was more language and judgment and reasoning that became more of a difficulty for her. And then she had delusions. And those, those will stop you in your tracks when she starts seeing things that aren't there or believing things that have not happened.
Yeah.
And that was really, really difficult for us. It also caused serious sleep disruption in her case. So there's some overlap in the causes with Alzheimer's, but it has what's called Lewy bodies. So these are actual changes in the brain. They can see them at autopsy under a microscope, and those start to cause damage in the brain. And there's other changes in the brain too, but at this point, we don't have effective treatments for Lewy body dementia in the same way that we're starting to for Alzheimer's.
Sure.
So there's different types of dementia, and the reason it's important to understand this is knowing that someone has dementia generically doesn't tell you whether or not they're going to have these hallucinations or certain kinds of symptoms that you need to watch out for. And the treatments differ depending on the kind of dementia. So whenever we talk to people, we say, you know what, go find out what kind, because often they're given the generic diagnosis, and that's not that helpful.
It's interesting to hear you talk about this because it's like thinking backwards about how it all happened for us. Yeah. So she's showing signs, mostly my mom, mostly language was her number one difficulty. She was having a hard time finding words, and that was happening as early as 65. But the way that I was able to kind of understand it was like dementia was like the umbrella, and then Alzheimer's, Lewy bodies.
That's exactly it.
Everything came underneath it. That was like my visual that I was able to understand. Several of the doctors did think that my mom had Lewy bodies, and they said that there are Parkinsonian signs also, which means like she would have difficulties with her motor skills or her body functioning, because my mom does have delusions sometimes. We went to Mayo and basically deduced that it was Alzheimer's.
Okay.
So I learned a lot in the journey because you're kind of trying to describe to the doctors, okay, this is what's happening and these are all of the signs. I do want to mention too, this is sort of backing up to like the human experience because you're explaining it clinically. I don't know what your experience was taking your mom to the doctor, but I had to take my mom to the doctor. And I had to figure out how to say to the doctor. I was trying to be like, I was like winking. I'm like, hey, over here. Right. Hey, my mom thinks we're here for one reason, but we're here for another reason.
Yes.
Do I like write it down on a piece of paper and lift it up, or do I like pass them a code?
Over. Yeah.
Did you? Yeah, I think people really underestimate. I did not know how to do this.
Yes,
I did not know how to take my mother, who is private and prideful, and my North Star, who still was very much self-aware and understanding. She knew something was off, but she was a person in the world. She was in my life. It was not like, oh, she can't hear me or she doesn't understand what I'm saying. I have to find a way to say in front of this capable woman to the doctor that my mom is experiencing these symptoms. And I don't know if you have anything to offer, but that was one of the hardest things that I had to do.
Oh, I can relate to that. Absolutely. It's so hard. And there were different points along the journey too, in terms of, how do you have that conversation with your mother too? Like, do you talk to your mom before you go to the doctor? That's the first thing I encourage people to do is to say something and to plan for how you're going to say something and what are you going to say. I had a whole way that I did it.
How did you do it?
Yeah. So
because I know there are people listening that are probably right in this moment. And
absolutely. And it's such a hard place to be when you are afraid that something's wrong. So the first thing I did is I went to the Alzheimer's Association website. It sounds like I'm making that up, but I actually did. And I printed off what are called the 10 warning signs. And I printed copies for myself and my siblings. So each of us had a copy. And I said, okay, I want you to read these and write down, have you seen any of these in mom? Have you have any examples of any of these happening? And we each did it ourselves, and there was some overlap. So I focused on the overlap, and there was enough there that I thought, okay, I'm not imagining this. Because
Yeah.
I could see Alzheimer's, as you might imagine. I might see Alzheimer's in places early, and maybe it's not there because of my, work. So
Yeah. Right.
I wasn't imagining it. And then I started to gather very specific examples of what I had seen. And an example was my husband said, I came into the kitchen and your mother had left the faucet running. It was completely fully on and no one was there. And he said, so I went over and I shut it off. So that was an example. And another one was a conversation we just had that she completely forgot. And it was bizarre. That was really bad. So I had all these examples. And then I decided I was going to talk to her. And I said, Mom, if I ever saw any changes, or if we ever saw any changes, what would you want us to do? Would you want me to say something? Or do you really, do you not want to talk about this? Like, what do you want? And to her credit, she stopped and she said, what have you seen? I would want to know. What have you seen?
I love that you asked her that.
Yeah,
I never even thought to ask my mom that.
Really helps to ask. And if she says no, then it's a whole other conversation, right? Like, oh, come on.
But I love that you asked her that, because I think that we all start to discount this person in this weird way where we're like, we got to talk behind their back. We can't talk about it to them. And we forget that they have such agency, and we forget how to honor that agency. And that's such a simple, amazing way to say, what would you want? I love that. I wish I had met you like years ago.
No. So let me share what happened a little bit too, because I gave those examples, right? And what would not have worked is, well, Mom, your memory's not what it used to be. If I said that, she'd say, of course my memory is not and whose memory is what it used to be? I mean, I don't know about you guys, but my memory is nowhere near what it used to be.
No. I don't remember what I did an hour ago. Like, it's true.
I'm ODing on my blueberry pills because I'm like, maybe this will make me sharper.
Yeah. So I was prepared with those two examples that I just mentioned. And the first one where I said, well, Jim came in and he found that you left the water running. She goes, oh, that wasn't me. That was him. And he was in the other room and he's like, what? I didn't do that. And I'm like, it's okay. It's okay. And I said, oh, okay. All right. Well, there was another one. So I gave the other example of the conversation we'd had. And I won't share it because it's a long example, but it really was almost incontrovertible that it was a major memory slip. And when I told her that, she said, oh, wow, that's really bad. And I said, well, it was notable and we got to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
So then we went to the doctor.
I love that.
Yep.
And that was a whole other thing then. Yeah. Because the doctor, when I said, we have these concerns, he said, oh, yeah, your mom has dementia. And I said, oh, really? Okay. So how did you tell me how you determined that? And then he got very nervous and he said, you know what? I'm going to send her for a referral. And because the way he determined it was what I call the eyeball method, which is he looked her up and down. He's like, yeah, she kind of seems like she has dementia. He didn't do a single test. He didn't do anything. And she was complicated. And so he sent her out, had a full evaluation, and that started us down the pathway of careful evaluation and taking it seriously, like it's worthy of note and worthy of attention and care and treatment.
But I love that she was in on the conversation with you and that you found a way to bring her into the conversation without making her feel like what she had to say didn't count and what she thought didn't count. I think I'm a pretty good communicator. Man, we all struggled with that. We all just couldn't figure out how to get her to the doctor and to talk about it to the doctor without saying it in front of her. It was this crazy dance we were doing because we just wanted to protect her. I did share with my mom, this is what's going on and this is why we're doing this, because I felt like that was the best thing to do. But I love how you invited her to ask her what she wanted. And I think, man, that's so subtle, but it's so powerful.
And it doesn't always work though, too. So one thing I did want to share, another tip that we give people. I like your example. You were thinking of like, could I slip them a note or give her, how am I going to communicate with the
Pig
doctor?
Latin? I was like, could I do Pig Latin? Like dementia de or whatever. Alzheimer's else.
So the other thing that we have recommended that people do, and I did this too, is send a fax to the physician ahead of time. Now, that sounds so old-fashioned, but you got to figure out what kind of communication will they accept. I think nowadays I probably could have sent a private
like
email.
Like a My Chart or something.
Yes, something. Mm-hmm. But whatever the method is, send a communication to the doctor before the visit and say, just lay it out. I've spoken to my mother, but I want to respect her dignity. And this is what we're seeing very briefly. And just put your question in there. Could you please evaluate this and raise this issue? Now, I also have heard people when they go in and they're hoping that the physician is going to keep it sort of on the low down.
Yeah.
That you did that. And they're like, wow, your daughter actually this whole list. So there's no guarantees. You could say, please do not share this. Please just pursue this without embarrassing me or her. But you know what? You do what you can to try to move it forward.
I think it's important too, no matter what our parents' health ailments are, is to remember that these are things that are happening to them. These are things that could happen to us. Yep. Eventually, it's not who they are, but it is something that is happening to them. And I think when it comes to Alzheimer's and dementia, people do just clump it all together. They just put a label on it. And it's a very dismissed disease, even though it's so prevalent. Do you see any changes that are happening now in how we approach Alzheimer's and dementia in a more open, compassionate, empathetic, educated way?
I do. And I think part of it is that people are speaking up and people with Alzheimer's are speaking up. I really credit those living with Alzheimer's, especially in the early stages, when they're able to say something. And they say, this is Alzheimer's, look at me. And this is how I want to be treated. Learning from people who are going through this in the early stages, who are still incredibly articulate and just so inspiring. And then that does affect also how we view things as a disease progresses. There's been a shift towards what's called person-centered care. And Robyn, I was thinking about that when you were talking earlier about what you were hoping for your mother, that people would know she's this amazing woman with this whole history, and this is what she loves, and this is what she doesn't like, and all of those things. And that's what we want for all of us. But we have to keep reminding, when it's stressful, when it's busy, when it's hard, you still need to remember the person and what they represent. And yes, they have challenges caused by a disease, but their personhood is incredibly important, and also important in helping them live a good life. There were things that I know about my mom, that she would do anything for a peanut butter cup. I mean, it sounds weird. I think I would.
I love that. Yeah, I would.
Really, I agree. So she refused to get out of the car. They moved her on a day when I was not in the state. They said, your mom's out. We're moving her into a new place. She'd never seen it. Oh, it was just awful. And they called and said, Elizabeth, I don't know what to tell you, but your mother refuses to get out of the car and into the new home. And I said, do you have any peanut butter cups? And she said, I think I do, or any other candy, any sweets. And they had ice cream. And so I said, just bring them out to the car. And say, Joanne, we've got some dessert that we're serving right now, And she got out of that car and she went in and she ate the dessert, right? And that's what I mean. It's like to find what brings you joy and bring it into that moment of, that was a terrible moment for her. She was terrified.
Yeah.
She was terrified and angry, I'm sure. And to just kind of, okay, I know what will make her happy. Let's ease it a little bit. Let's get through this. So yeah, we can do better. And the better we know someone, the better able we're going to be able to come up with something just to ease it a bit, to get through a tough time.
I love that story so much because, you know, like I am now my mom's mom. Really.
You're doing an incredible job.
But for my mom, it's also dessert and peanut M&Ms.
She's a dessert.
She loves peanut M&Ms.
That would have worked too, Robyn. My mom would have gotten up for peanut M&Ms.
And you know, when my mom was my mom, when there was anything tough, she would bring peanut M&Ms. And so I feel like
it's full circle.
It's full circle.
I love that.
You know, when my mom's having a really hard time, which I don't ever remember, like she just was such an incredible mother to me. She just helped me on the hardest of days. And it's crazy because now she calls, you know, my dad actually calls me and he's like, your mom needs to talk to you, which is code for like, your mom's having a hard day. And I know that like I can help her more specifically than anyone, me and my sister, you know, but I know that if she talks to me, I can just tell her, Mom, you're fine. You know what you're doing. Everything's going to be okay. I've got your back. Yeah. I took all of the belongings you're worried about that they stole and I hid them. I do lie to her, but you know, they're white lies, but it's like
therapeutic.
Yes. And I'm like, there's some peanut M&Ms in the cupboard. I want you to just go in there and eat a couple of them and take a load off. You don't have to worry about anything. That. You're doing exactly what you need to do. Another thing that my mother loves and loved is she wants to be helpful. And so, for instance, this week, I have a lot going on. My husband's going out of town, so I'm taking care of my two littles by myself. And it's a lot, you know. And my mom still, she shows up in this voice and is like, I want to help you this week. What can I do to help you, Robyn?
Oh, I love that.
I want to help you. I'll come over. I'll help you with the kids. What can I do? And it's like, it just stops you in your tracks because you're like, here's this woman. She's still in there.
Yeah.
She's still in there. And I said, oh, Mom, you absolutely can help me. That is such a good idea. Thank you so much. You always know how to help me.
Aww.
And I feel like this is just a tip that I want to give people. If their people are going through this for holidays, my mom comes over and I know that she wants to come early because she wants to help me with the brisket. She wants to help me set the table. And she can't set the table anymore. But I know that there's nothing that makes her happier than helping. And so before she comes over, I think about, okay, what can I give her to do? And how can I feel like she's in the kitchen with me and we're preparing everything together just like we used to, and that she is integral to the holiday experience. She's helping me. And it doesn't matter. I have to reset the table. I have to redo everything she does. Yeah. But to my mom, that is like the number one preservation of her dignity. And I just want to say to people, if you can still play along with figuring out a way for your parents or whoever you love who's going through this to feel helpful, important, nothing makes her feel like more of a regular person than like setting the table.
Oh, I love that.
And don't you think that goes a long way?
Oh my gosh,
like
such a long way.
In the days then after that, like it's even with memory loss, you know, maybe it's just for a moment, right? Mm-hmm. But if it can give them joy for even a little longer, that goes a long way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to get you Kleenex. I'll be right back.
I love what you shared, Robyn. I mean, it's just everybody wants to feel like they're making a difference, like they have an impact. And the fact that you're able to adjust things, you know, or really it's like set the table and you can tweak it later is a perfect example.
This conversation is also making me think, you know, Robyn and I have very young children also. And in the same way as I'm teaching our 5.5-year-old on how to empty the dishwasher right now. And when it comes to like kids learning something, I read somewhere once where it was like, it's not about perfection. It's about learning and it's about like the progress and the doing and the experience of this is the first time that they've ever done that. Right. And so you're teaching them and it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be messy. You're probably going to have to redo it a couple times to actually get the dishes clean. But I feel like that same approach could be taken when it comes to being with our parents who are experiencing memory loss because they're maybe learning it for the first time again?
What's really funny that I was going to add is that, I watch my sister-in-laws, they have big families, and I watch how all their kids help, and so I realized, how kids feel really important when you ask them to set the table.
Yes.
So
Yes, they do.
I actually was having my 3-year-old and my mom set the table together, which was
great.
a shit show. It was a shit show. I was just laughing to myself. I'm like, this is hilarious. I'm like, they both want to help so much. I didn't even know how powerful that was. So it is very funny. I don't know if anyone listening has we're sandwiched. So if you have your little people and then your older people and you're giving them a task, it's a shit show. You turn your back and you're like, well, that was a good try, but they're doing it together. It's actually amazing.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Beautiful mess.
Yeah, it's great. So I'm going to come back to one of the questions that we have. We often hear about the stages of Alzheimer's, early, middle, late. Can you walk us through that progression or what that typically looks like?
Yeah, sure. And I'll say right up front, typical is tricky because there's so much variation. And depending on the type of dementia too, it does vary. In general, in the early stages, what we see, and people are getting diagnosed earlier and earlier. I mean, we still have a lot of improvement in that area, but we're going to get to the point in the next 5 years, I expect, where people will be diagnosed and you won't be able to tell at all. I mean, I meet many people who you couldn't tell had Alzheimer's, but that's, I think, going to be much more common as we start to use blood tests. And it doesn't require that you show cognitive impairment to get a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. That day will come.
Sure.
But right now, you do need to show some cognitive impairment. And so what we'll see is people who start to have difficulties doing higher level tasks. One of the first places you'll see challenges is finances. So in the early stages, people often have trouble handling their finances, handling bills, doing their taxes, assuming they've always been able to do this, before.
Right, yeah.
Oh my God, I've never been able to do them. I'm fucked.
So not you.
Excuse my language. Just diagnose me right now. Has that been my problem the whole time?
Exactly.
Jeez. Okay, sorry.
The other thing that I do want to mention is falling victim to scams, recognizing scams and phishing. Now, any of us could have that happen, right? But
yeah, they're getting good.
Yeah, they're getting good. And in early stage Alzheimer's, it can be really hard to identify that someone is trying to trick you. That high level functioning, also things like executive functioning, I think of it as party planning. What goes into your gathering, Robyn, where everybody's coming over for, the holidays and all the things that have to happen in a certain order? For someone in the early stages, that kind of activity is going to be too difficult, right? Yeah. So we're talking very high level functions. Things like driving may be okay for a while. People may still be able to drive, but even that can be tricky. So early stages mean the person is doing relatively well. They can take care of themselves, dress themselves, even prepare food maybe, but they might make some mistakes as they're doing it. But those high level functions that we do in our jobs or in our everyday lives really start to suffer. When we get to middle stages, that's when taking care of ourselves starts to become more of an issue. So things like dressing, eating a healthy diet, dressing appropriately for the weather, communication becomes even harder, saying what you mean, remembering people. And this is where people start to really forget who people are. Recent acquaintances can be lost in terms of remembering them. But even people like grandkids, not remembering a grandchild's name, which can happen, but even remembering that that's my grandchild can start to happen in middle stages. And even the dreaded day where your parent doesn't know who you are can happen in the middle stages. It could, yeah. And then later stages is where the person needs total support, total care for everything. And so, and these really vary. I mean, in terms of how long it could last, early stage could be a year, it could be 5 years. It really depends on the person and how early they were diagnosed.
Yeah.
And then middle stages, again, similar. It could be, 2 or 3 years for someone. And then late stages, again, it varies. Sometimes people never make it to the late stages.
I love that you're talking about the stages, because I think when people hear Alzheimer's, they're like, oh, they don't know who you are. People who have never experienced before, they just kind of think about it in one way. Yeah. But when we did actually hear the word Alzheimer's when we were at Mayo, the doctor was talking through things, and then I kind of was like, okay, stop. And I was like, can we just talk about what we can do now at this phase to either make my mom feel the best she can? And is there anything that we can do to slow things down? I think a lot of people that are listening might have someone who's in early stages. I remember them saying, okay, like exercise, diet, interacting with people was huge. That was a huge thing. So I really wanted to shift the conversation with that in that doctor's appointment to be like, okay, we know now. What can we do? Is that really off from what you were going to ask?
Well, I was just going to ask, which might be a precursor, like, what are the benefits to being diagnosed early? I feel like a lot of people might be terrified of that, and rightfully so. But what are the benefits to an early diagnosis?
Yeah, I think it ties in with Robyn and what she was saying. So it's evolving too in terms of the benefits of an early diagnosis. Forever, we've talked about the benefit as being you can start to put things in place, like what you would like to have happen in the future. If you still have the capacity to make those decisions, you can have conversations about, well, this is what I would prefer. This is where I want to live. This is what kind of care I would prefer. So you can do the things that Robyn was talking about. Start to maybe try to look at your lifestyle and see, is there exercise? Is there a dietary change that you might make? It's not that it's going to reverse things, but it may just improve someone's functioning and make them the best they can be in that moment, given that they're dealing with Alzheimer's. You mentioned social connections. I think that's a great example of doing things that bring you joy and happiness with other people. That's something that then you're like, this is more important. I need to do it now more than ever if I have Alzheimer's. Sometimes people pull out that bucket list and say, we're doing the cruise. Those are things that I think are really important and meaningful. But the other piece is you can connect to other people who have Alzheimer's and learn from them about what they're doing. And truly, I have met the most incredible people with Alzheimer's. They inspire me every day. I want to be like them. How's that? The things that they do to help other people to have a fulfilling, meaningful life is really fantastic. And you don't get that extra impetus, that energy, if you don't even know that you're dealing with Alzheimer's. I think it does bring things into focus, so to speak. But the other piece is treatment. And now there are emerging treatments. And so for me personally, if I started having issues, I would like to believe I would go to the doctor early, because I would like to see, am I even eligible for one of the newer treatments? Because it could potentially slow the progression of the disease. And I think in the coming years, like we've got 2 now that are disease modifying treatments that are, and I get to meet the people who are on these treatments, and I'm like, wow, I would want that option. I'm not saying I would take the option, but I want the option. You only get the option if you're diagnosed early. If it's too late, you won't qualify for the medications.
I love that you're talking about this, because I've been hearing bits and pieces, and I'm trying to piece it all together myself. So I know with Alzheimer's, unfortunately with the disease, you're diagnosed so late in the game, right? Because they can see the amyloid buildup and you're sort of like past repair. But there are ways to be able to see how that early buildup of the amyloid plaque. And I know you've talked about the blood test. I'm just really interested for people that maybe they know they might be genetically disposed to something. Or are there ways to tell if they have a disposition to it? Are there things they could be doing?
Yeah, so
What's
things.
the blood test thing?
Yeah. Let me divide it into two parallel answers.
Sorry, I have so many questions. Tell me everything.
One is, if you're concerned about, your own risk of Alzheimer's because you have it in your family, what can you do? So there's risk reduction. Like, what can we all be doing that could potentially reduce our risk? So there's that. But then there's also, how can I find out early? increasingly we are seeing people diagnosed early enough to benefit from the treatments. So yes, it's true that sometimes it's very late that people are diagnosed, if ever. And in which case I would agree with you that there's a certain point at which these treatments, removing amyloid isn't going to help. It's already done damage and it's progressed to the next level, which is there's a whole cascade of things that happen. But increasingly what's happening is if they can get it early, even with cognitive testing, they do things like a scan to visualize the amyloid or a blood test. And these treatments will remove amyloid from the brain and potentially then kind of turn the clock back a little bit.
You can remove the amyloid?
Yes, yeah. That's the new through these treatments. So there's 2 treatments that are FDA approved, and they act a little differently, but they're both focusing on a different aspect to amyloid, and they remove the amyloid from the brain. It's like, I think of it like a whiteboard. You clean that whiteboard real good and it comes back. Yeah, the amyloid's going to come back, but it buys you time for a little while. You have a clean whiteboard, right?
Wow.
And that is how I think of these treatments. At this point, they slow the progression. And I was just at the International Research Conference, AAIC, and one of the companies said they're seeing delays of like as much as 3 years in the progression in people who've been on these medications. So more to learn about those. But
totally. The whiteboard, is it like a one-hit wonder? Is it like you clean your whiteboard once, or is it a medication that can keep cleaning?
Yeah, and that's what they're trying to figure out right now is, so how many times can we clean the whiteboard, right? And there's promise. It seems like maybe you can keep cleaning it. And it's not that it's going to permanently cure, but it is a significant development in the field of Alzheimer's. Now, it's not right for everybody. There are some side effects, especially in the early weeks of treatment. People have to be closely monitored, but we're even learning more about how they may be able to reduce that risk tremendously. So stay tuned on that, because it really does change my own perspective for myself, because I have risk factors here. And I think, gosh, just seeing it, I'm like, I'd want access. I think I'd want access. And when you see what's in the pipeline, it's like, I think there's going to be more. There's not just going to be one approach. It'll be like HIV, the treatments are multifaceted and people are living with HIV.
Yes.
And living fulfilling, meaningful life. That's what we're going to get to. I am convinced. The Alzheimer's Association has been doing a landmark lifestyle study to see, does changing your lifestyle affect your brain health and ultimately reduce your risk of getting Alzheimer's? And they just had the first report out of this big 2-year study, and they found that 45 minutes of exercise 3 times a week and weightlifting and stretching. So it was like pretty intense exercise. They did like a Mediterranean diet, the MIND diet. And so lots of healthy fruits and vegetables and lean proteins, and then social engagement as well, and some cognitive training. The cognitive training didn't make as much of a difference. I'll just tell you that. But the other things, they found that these individuals in this intervention reduced their brain age, their cognitive age, by 2 years, just in the time frame they were doing this.
Wow.
The other piece they had to watch out for, and this is important for all of us, is blood pressure. So you want to manage high blood pressure. If you have high blood pressure, it's a big deal. You've got to get it under control. And then other things like if you have diabetes, controlling your diabetes, those numbers make a big difference in brain health. So what they found is if you can get in better shape, it has immediate positive impacts on your brain. And we're going to learn even more about that. They're going to share imaging results. They're going to share blood tests. And ultimately see, are these people less likely to get Alzheimer's or to delay getting Alzheimer's than other people?
Wow.
So,
wow, that is so cool.
We are definitely
walk. There was also a study that showed that people with the E4 gene, this is a genetic risk factor, if they walked a significant number of steps, more days than not, they overcame the added risk of the gene.
What's
So
the E4 gene?
Wow.
E4 gene is the most common one that we talk about, and that's it's more common in people with Alzheimer's. So if you have 1 or 2 copies, especially 2 copies of the E4 gene, it raises your risk of developing late life Alzheimer's.
So it's kind of like, it's like a BRCA gene for the brain?
Yeah, and I'm not an expert on BRCA, but
Yeah, that's an oversimple. I'm not a doctor, but that's okay.
Yeah. So it's a risk factor gene where it means that it's not that you're guaranteed to get Alzheimer's. There are some other genes that if you inherit it, you will get it, but they're very rare. This one's a little more common. It would be as much as 15% of the population who has the E4 gene. And so when you have a parent who's developed Alzheimer's in later life, and this is only pertaining to Alzheimer's, by the way, not another type of dementia. And so if they have Alzheimer's, you just know that it may be because they have the E4 gene, and if they have it, you may have inherited it. So that's why there's a risk of if your parent has it, you have more likelihood.
It's not always like if your parent had it, then you 100% will, right?
Correct. It's not. Mm-mm.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, if your parent had 2 copies of it, then you definitely
have it.
You got one. Yeah. And we're still not in the place where we're encouraging everybody, go get tested. So there's a new FDA approved blood test that was just approved about 8 weeks ago. And it is a blood test that will detect essentially amyloid. And so instead of having to get a spinal tap where they would measure cerebrospinal fluid, it looks as though this test is a significant advancement in helping to determine if someone has Alzheimer's. So they use it in the presence of symptoms. So they're not using it for people who don't have any symptoms, no problems at all. They just want to see. It's not used for that at this point. But it is in a diagnostic process. So you think about your situation with your mom, my situation with my mom. If there had been a blood test when the doctor could have said, well, let's order a blood test and see, that would have been so helpful.
Yes.
And that's where we're getting to that. They're not yet clinically readily available, but they're working on rolling these out now that they're FDA approved.
Okay, I'm glad because I was like, I can go get a blood test and see if I have amyloid, and that's not true. Okay, because I was like, sign me up.
Yeah.
And can you actually talk about what amyloid plaque is?
I was just about to.
I'm like deep in it.
We've been talking a lot about.
People are like, what the hell is amyloid? What are they talking about? I got to listen to a different podcast to figure out the hell that is. Okay.
So there are 2 characteristic hallmark features in Alzheimer's. One is the presence of what's called amyloid plaques, and the other is called neurofibrillary tangles. And so these plaques are made up of a protein. What happens is this long protein gets cut in a particular way in individuals with Alzheimer's. And this little bit of what's called beta amyloid, it's like this little piece of protein, gets released, and it's really sticky and nasty and toxic. And so you may hear it referred to as just amyloid, but it's actually beta amyloid. And what happens in the brain is when this tiny little fragment gets released, it's almost like a little piece of duct tape. So think about what happens to duct tape when you're working with it. If it gets stuck on itself, what happens? Like you're toast. It's stuck.
Totally.
It's not unsticky.
You throw it away.
Right? You throw it away.
Yeah.
So I think of beta amyloid like little teeny pieces of duct tape. And when it gets stuck to itself, it sticks. And then more and more sticks. And the more and more that it sticks, it becomes a plaque. And so think of a plaque.
Hardens.
It's like all this sticky mass stuck, all these little fibrils stick together. And so a plaque is a massive beta amyloid or amyloid that's sticky and it kills everything around it. And that's what happens in Alzheimer's. So there's free-floating little fibrils, and some of these drugs clear out the free-floating fibrils, and some of them clear out the plaques. And so they act differently, but they're tackling that in the brain.
And I've heard that they think sleep can clear your amyloids, or that's what they think sleep does.
That while you're sleeping, part of the process is to clear amyloid out.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I think we still have a lot to learn about sleep. Some of the early theories about what was happening, I think, have changed. So I'm very careful talking about sleep. All I know is sleep is really important for brain health. And in a healthy individual without Alzheimer's, we clear out this amyloid, the beta amyloid. But if we're unable to clear it out, then it stays in our brain, and then it triggers what we call a cascade of other things, including some other proteins, and that's where those tangles start to form. Sure. And so the treatments are targeting this first step, the amyloid. But if other things have already triggered in significant ways, it may not be enough.
Sure. That makes sense. Wow. Thank you for explaining that. Yeah. What about the other type that you said?
The neurofibrillary tangles?
Yes. Yeah.
Tangles.
Yeah. So those are interesting. So those actually occur inside brain cells. So the amyloid plaque is outside the brain cells, and it starts to wreak havoc with the environment in the brain. But then the neurofibrillary tangles are when a neuron has died. It actually, what happens is this tau protein starts to change. And as it changes, it loses the structural integrity of the neuron, and it collapses in itself and it dies. And when you see it under a microscope, it looks like a tangled up little mess. It's like, it distinctly looks like a tangle, which is why they're like, hey, that's a tangle. Call it a tangle. And way back when, in 1906, they discovered Alzheimer's disease. So
that's kind of like the wiring of the brain.
Yeah, it's the connections between brain cells, right? And so as the brain cells, the neurons are our brain cells. And this infrastructure, essentially, tau makes up the microtubules, the structure of our brain cells is made up in part by tau. And when it changes, it loses the structure and it collapses. So think of it as like scaffolding on a building. If you lose all the little connections in the scaffolding and it collapses, it's the same kind of thing. That's what tau does. And it's really important in Alzheimer's and other types of dementia.
So those are the two markers. So you could have one or the other.
Well, no, you have to have both.
You have to have both. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And what they'll look for, though, presently, is they'll look for the symptoms of Alzheimer's. So typically they'll look for memory loss and communication and judgment issues. And then they'll look for these other changes. And it may be the amyloid piece is the next one now that we're able to see on a scan or in a blood test. And they're working on the same thing for tau. They have tau imaging. They will someday have a test, I'm sure. It's a little further behind amyloid, but it will get there.
But I might re-ask the question. Is there anything I should be doing, talking to my doctor, or something to either detect that something might already be happening or preventative?
Probably not at this point, although you could consider, there's two things I want to say. One is the other medical conditions that raise your risk that I did mention before. So high blood pressure, obesity, and diabetes. So that would be probably part of your normal conversations with your doctor anyway. But you really don't want to let those slide. The other piece, though, is you can look into whether there are clinical trials. Sometimes they're recruiting for people like you, like me, who have family history of Alzheimer's or another type of dementia, and they want to study it, whether to observe or to identify people before changes occur. And so you could also consider that. We have on our website at alz.org a service called Trial Match, where you could see, hey, is there anything where I live where they're looking for people like me? And it may just be, again, observational, or it might be looking at the use of a blood test for identifying people before. So that's another possibility to consider.
Can I ask about hormones? Do you know about hormones?
Well, let's ask about hormones.
Okay.
We're in our 40s.
I started taking some estrogen progesterone cream thing because the internet told me to, so I was like, sure, okay. I probably should have gone to a doctor, but since everything happened with my mom, which Elizabeth, you might actually feel similar, it really threw me into trying to figure out, how did this happen to my mom? What was their lifestyle in their 40s and then beyond? And I started to learn a lot about estrogen and how it can protect the brain. And I thought it was fascinating that overwhelmingly women are getting Alzheimer's and the correlation with hormones, and how I can't believe how little that is talked about, because it makes complete sense that, like, literally, I don't know if I'm saying this because, right, I'm dumbing it down for us normal people. Estrogen is flying up into your brain while you're premenopause, like right before your menopausal life. And then all of a sudden it no longer is shooting up into your brain. And estrogen was protecting your brain all that time. So now you go from maybe 50 plus, whenever you hit menopause, you no longer have this extremely important hormone floating around in your brain to protect it. And that doesn't sound like a major red flag to people, because it did to me. I was like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, right. I'll speak to you as a daughter, of someone who had Lewy Body Dementia and who really doesn't want to get that or Alzheimer's. I agree with you 100%. That reading the research about the relationship between estrogen and the brain, and how we lose it, and the fact that estrogen replacement therapy is not always encouraged. I had to fight to access it. So I did the same thing you did. I responded to some ad on Facebook. I got a cream, and then I thought, maybe I should talk to my doctor. Because I did get one of those creams, and I put it on my face, and I got dark spots. Like the next day, I'm like, okay, I think you need a doctor, a medical doctor. So anyway, but I did the same thing, because it's undeniable when you read this. You're like, okay, women. This is real. Like, estrogen is like a little mini fountain of youth.
Yes.
The other one is exercise, fountain of youth for your brain. And so
does that come in a cream too?
Yes. Yeah. I would probably buy it. But yeah, it's, I think it should be talked about more. For my OBGYN, she did not know anything about it.
Yeah.
At all. And I just said, look, I want to do this. I realize maybe there's a slight increased risk of breast cancer. And I said, but I know I'm at risk for Alzheimer's. I am.
Exactly.
So let's focus on that risk. And plus you feel better. Yeah. At least I do.
I do too. So you are doing it. Yeah.
I am doing it.
I feel better.
I feel better. I guess it's not for everybody. And I also know that the length of time makes a difference, that it's not forever. Yeah. That you have to be careful. So, I think we need to learn so much more about women, and why are we at greater risk? Is it purely because of menopause? There's more to it than that. The numbers are even greater for women. And even the expression of the genes appears to vary by gender. So that ApoE4 gene, heard a fantastic research presentation from Stanford researchers, and talking about and comparing men versus women with the E4 gene. And yet again, for women, it was much higher risk versus men. And I'm like, gosh darn it. And who knows if it's an interaction with hormones or something, but genes express themselves differently in people of different race, of different gender. And so there's so much more for us to learn about this.
Do you have a stat about men versus women with Alzheimer's?
Women are about 2/3 of those with Alzheimer's. Yeah, it's significant. And then of course we're much more likely to be caregivers.
Yeah.
Like you know? So we get the double whammy.
You've worked for the Alzheimer's Association now for close to 30 years, which is incredible. What keeps you committed?
I am clearly in it for the long haul, huh?
I love it.
And it's because I really am truly inspired by the people like you, caregiving for your mom, and the love that you show. I'm just so inspired, and especially by the people who are diagnosed and living with Alzheimer's that I get to work with. But also, I really wanted to stay in this until we get a treatment that will reverse this disease or stop it in its tracks. And I thought we had it when the first one was approved, and that was rough. That did not go very smoothly. These ones, that they're starting to look even better. And so I feel like I'm in it till it really is that people, not only that a treatment exists, but that people can get these treatments
Yes.
and afford them, and that they're readily available, because we're nowhere near that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to be very astute to be able to get access. You have to be an incredible advocate to pursue this, I think. And it shouldn't be that way.
You've worked with thousands of families. What have you learned from them that textbooks can't teach?
I love that question. I think sometimes it's the little things that are most important. And it's that piece around personhood that we were talking about, where being with someone when they're struggling. And Robyn, I think it comes naturally to you when you said, I tell my mom, it's going to be okay. It's fine. You're doing exactly what you need to do. And that, to me, is the best advice I ever received. And to someone with Alzheimer's, being that person who says, I got you, it's going to be okay, stick with me, is the best thing you can do for that person. You can be their angel just by being there and say, it's okay, you're right where you need to be, and I'm going to be here with you.
I love that. Okay, maybe this is a good closing question.
Okay.
This will wrap it up because this is amazing. Where can listeners go to learn more about prevention, maybe get resources or connect with the Alzheimer's Association? And what are you guys doing that is cool? Right.
All right. I'll tell you what I think is cool. So we have a new app for people who are newly diagnosed and for their care partners. And it's called My Alz Journey. So My ALZ Journey. It's free. It's available on either Google or Apple Store. And what it does is it has curated and pulls together early stage specific resources from our various platforms. So it makes it easy for people to find what they need when they need it in the early stages. Because, often for the early stages, you don't really want to necessarily go down certain pathways too soon. You don't have to look at everything. You want to just do it when you're ready. But also, I really recommend people go to our website at alz.org. All that information on risk reduction is available there. We have more information about warning signs, treatment, you name it, it's there, including how to get access to research studies. So
amazing.
Now, there's another resource, though, that I do recommend, especially for people who are caregivers. We have a program that's a free program available. It can be available virtual, live, or in person, and it's called the Empowered Caregiver. And it's a wonderful program. We actually did a randomized control trial and found that it made a significant impact on the people who took the class. So you can find that on our website. Again, it's called the Empowered Caregiver. And that, along with our 24/7 helpline, these are the kinds of resources that I highly recommend. I think that's a really helpful resource.
That's good. Me and my sister could do that together.
Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for all of your time today. We so appreciate you.
It's very generous.
And all of your wisdom.
Well, thank you for having me. And I wish you all the best with what you're doing. You're truly inspiring how much your love for your mom, for your parents as they go through this. I mean, I wish you all the best.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and hopefully you can take away some helpful info and tips. All links and resources can be found in our show notes.
Please share this episode with anyone you think this might help. And if you have a topic that you'd like to talk more with us about in the sandwich generation world, please slide into our DMs on Instagram. Our handle is @thesandwichgenerationpod. We hope you'll be back for more combos with us soon. And remember, no matter whose diaper you're changing, you're never alone.
That was great. That was great. That was really good. All right. Wow. Elizabeth was amazing.
She's a new friend.
She is absolutely a new friend.
A really smart new friend.
I feel so grateful that our paths crossed and we had the opportunity to talk with her, because that was wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
So there are some takeaways from the episode that I just kind of wanted to recap if anyone is listening this far, because we talked about medical things, clinical things. We talked a lot of emotions. We talked a lot of, what's coming in the future from the Alzheimer's research, which I found like very promising also. But this is a very full episode. So one of the first things that I absolutely loved and adored was this sentence that we can all ask our loved ones, no matter what kind of health journey they are in, asking them, if you see any changes, what do you want me to do? I loved how that like invited them into the conversation. It gives them
agency. It reminded me of when Rachel gave us that same advice about Rachel Schroman about what do you want the legal stuff to look like. It's just so simple, but you don't ever think, because suddenly you feel like, oh, my parents no longer capable. They don't know what's going on. It's up to me. And you forget, like, no, they still are in the game.
Absolutely.
We can still ask them. And that's such a good way to honor their dignity, because that was what I struggled with the most.
Well, and sometimes it feels like in those moments we have to also figure it all out. And it's not that we're trying to be disrespectful. It's just like you're trying to figure it out. And
you don't think they have the answers, so you don't think to ask them.
Right. And maybe they don't have the answers, but maybe they're able to articulate what it is that they hope for. Sometimes finding the right words to open the conversation, it is so simple, but it's like a toolkit.
I can't even tell you how much we ruminated on this. Like, we're talking about this so quickly, but like, this was months and months. I think even 2 years from seeing the first signs and all me and my dad and my sister having concerns about my mom, to figuring out like, how are we going to say it in front of her? How are we going to say it to her? Because we knew how like afraid of the disease she was, and how undermining it would be to bring it up. I mean, like, it sounds simple the way we're repeating it now, but like when you're in front of somebody who's your parent and you're trying to bring this up, like, they might already be defensive. They might be embarrassed. Like, it is beyond difficult. So even though we're providing these words, I mean, it was it's so hard. It's so hard. Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine somebody asking me that.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I would be angry and resentful. Yeah. That's the risk too, is like, how is this person going to react to me?
Well, and I think you just have to be okay with whatever that is.
Yeah.
Hold space for whatever that is, and just keep trying.
Yes. I mean, there's just no easy way, but I do like the idea of like giving them the agency and the power and the dignity is something so simple. That was a great tip.
I love that.
Yeah.
I also love the advice of, when you are at the doctor, when you do get to that point, really being an advocate on, if there is a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or a form of dementia, getting really specific about what type or what kind, so that you can really find the right treatments.
I also wanted to bring something up that is kind of like specific, but if any of you are listening and you're taking your loved one in, and they will do a couple different tests that they might give your loved one to test their memory. My mom, when she knew she was being tested, she got very anxious.
Sure.
And then she really couldn't perform very well on the test. I didn't know this was coming. I didn't know about the test. And again, it's really important to get on board with your parent and then try to be in the room as much as you can. You can't be in the room during the test, but you can be in the room after the test, and you can say, okay, my mom gets really nervous when she's answering these questions, so this might not be as accurate as it could be if like I were asking her an off the cuff question. But it's, again, thinking about them as a person and how, sort of like traumatic or scary this is when you're basically putting your brain on trial and your memory on trial in front of everybody. It's a lot of pressure for that loved one.
I know Elizabeth also talked about collecting really specific examples and to have that information going into doctor's appointments. Right.
Yeah. And I liked the idea of discussing those with your loved one if you can before you go into the doctor. Like, I do seriously remember being like, Mom, look over there, or like, go to the bathroom.
Yep.
I just was desperate to figure out, I did eventually try talking to her more and more before we went into the doctor so she didn't feel betrayed or blindsided. But it is so real. It's hard.
Another takeaway is that even though early diagnosis is terrifying, none of us want that. The earlier you are diagnosed, you have so many more options or benefits. So even though it's terrifying and so scary, you may have access to more treatments. You might have a little more focus and clarity on your life. I know Elizabeth mentioned, like, bring out the bucket list. You know, how are you going to live? My takeaway from that also was like the ability to plan. Like, you have the foresight and you have the time with all of your capacity to plan for either yourself or your loved one, you know?
I'm reflecting on, I do remember seeing signs when my mom was 65, which was pretty young. And that was even before I got married. And they were subtle, but it's interesting. Like, had I had this information ahead of time, the idea that like someone could be diagnosed, I don't know what the word is, not a death sentence. It's not like now your life is over because you've been diagnosed and it's all downhill from here. I like the idea of like, okay, we know you have this. And now what can we do now that we have this information to slow it down or like improve your lifestyle? Because even from 65 to 71, we could have done so many things differently. We did have COVID during that time.
Sure.
And I do believe COVID actually really exacerbated and advanced.
Well, there's that community piece, right?
Yes.
That it sounds like that
Isolation,
community connection piece.
Absolutely.
That's so important with your...
But I just think that's an interesting idea that like, okay, I have this and it doesn't mean like my life is over. I can actually live with this, kind of similar to how people, it's kind of like the cancer diagnosis sort of has changed a little bit where people are like, okay, I have a cancer diagnosis, but I can live with this cancer and I can keep it at bay. It's kind of the same idea, which I've never thought of Alzheimer's that way. I've always thought of it as just like period, the end. So that's interesting.
The promise of emerging treatments. The fact that she said that about 6 to 8 weeks ago only, there's a new FDA approved blood test that isn't super accessible right now, but is going to be becoming more accessible for people who are showing signs and are in the middle of seeing doctors for a diagnosis that a blood test can now show so much, which I think is amazing. Not FDA approved is this like idea of estrogen, and you know, as we are going through menopause or perimenopause, and for women specifically,
sexy stuff, ladies, sexy
but
stuff.
I kind of loved the estrogen and exercise are our fountains of youth.
Yeah, and her Wild West approach, like mine, like, I found some estrogen on the internet. I love that. I was like, oh, good. Are you too? Great.
Because that shit goes to our brains. It goes to our brains. And it helps us. And the last takeaway is that the Alzheimer's Association has so much to offer, and we will make sure and link everything that Elizabeth talked about in our show notes. But they have so many resources, you know, a new app if you're diagnosed early, the Empowered Caregiver, which is a virtual class for caregivers. That's you.
Yep.
For those with Alzheimer's, a 24/7 helpline. I don't know if people are calling helplines anymore, but I forget about that. But
faxes and helplines, that was funny.
I know.
A fax.
They're still holding on.
If anyone wants to know what a fax is, we'll put it in the glossary.
But I forget that there are, you know, people you can literally call in the moment.
Yeah, that's incredible.
And hopefully this was helpful.
Oh, I learned a ton.
Well, you're doing amazing. You and your whole family are doing amazing.
Yeah, and my mom's doing amazing too.
Yeah. You are doing right by her.
Yeah.
I see it. We'll grab a tissue and call it a day.
God. All right, here we go again.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.